Well, welcome everyone to another episode of the RTI Speed Tips with Bob and Chad. Today, our special guest is former IMCA national champion, former North Dakota Tour champion, Mr. Jeff Taylor. Jeff, tell us what's been going on. I know you made some changes there. Tell us about that, kind of what all went down about the middle of the year last year and what you got going now.
Yeah, I just, it was getting tougher and tougher to do my own deal, to try to race, at the level I needed to race and travel around. And, the more cars I built, the harder it was to go race. And then we had some tragic stuff happen in 15 that was a personal deal that kind of set us back a little bit too and really affected, how I was able to go race and help people. Which was an unfortunate deal. But I decided there, around the first of last year, I had been friends with the Mosley family, Scott and Marlene, Travis, their daughter. Don't see their daughter much, but was around Travis quite a bit racing. And, they had decided they wanted to maybe invest and get into the racing world. And, he had come to me and approached me about, hey, I want to help you. Let's do a bigger thing. And, I'd tried doing it once already and it didn't work out. Didn't do it right. A lot of it was my fault. And just didn't want to make that same mistake twice. So, all in all, they decided to go in and buy Larry Shaw, which was incorporated, which was my uncle. And, me and Larry's always had a great relationship, still got a great relationship, which is my mom's brother. It's a big racing family around here. But anyway, we incorporated my business into that business. And, I went in with them and we started, Shaw race cars. And so that's basically, to sum it up in a nutshell, that's kind of what we done. And we took over, I guess, around July 1st of last year.
Yeah, because I know everybody was at Super Nationals, and I got to meet Mr. Mosley, and I knew Travis because when he used to help you and when he was racing and stuff. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was a neat deal. Like I said, they're a really good family. Great people from down south Arkansas, Bearden, Arkansas. Actually, they're up here now. They moved up here, bought a place up here, and just always had a really good relationship with them. Just able to be myself, which I am most of the time anyway. But they it's worked out real well for me, and so far for them, I think we're doing pretty good here. I think we've built 98, 99 cars since July last year, and our goal was 100 by this July. So we're on track. If we could get rid of this goofy COVID-19 or whatever, I think we'd be all right. I think it's just got kind of everybody in panic mode right now.
Yeah, most definitely. Have you been racing much lately?
Yeah, I've raced about everywhere you can go. It's funny you say the COVID stuff's got everybody shut down, but around here we couldn't have raced if we wanted to. We've had so much rain; it's just been crazy. I think there's 2 weekends we could have raced since probably the 1st of March, and it's looking rainy again this weekend. It's just like last year we had a pretty wet spring. But this year it's just been rain and rain and rain. Not so much heavy rain, it's just constant rain.
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of what we've had experienced up here. I was kind of comparing the first 20 days of sales from last year to this year, and we're spot on to what we were last year. So, the big difference with the COVID stuff versus the rain, we're maintaining. So, in that situation, I'm pretty happy with that. How's things been going with you, Chad?
Pretty good. Yeah, we're having a good week. Pretty busy. Got to go racing last week. Pretty excited about that to get back to the track. Went to Fountain City there. They had open late models and modifieds, and So we were doing a little testing with a few new products that we're working on. We got that new limiter chain, the foam deal for the late model guys, and then we're working on a new tool that we were testing there. So just got a lot of exciting things coming up, and just excited about what's going on here.
So what type of a tool are you working on?
Well, the one I was testing at the track I can't talk about, but we made a new one today.
Sure.
Here we go.
Yeah, well, this is a new tool we just printed this today. It's for when you're changing the bearings in your suspension cage, so you can push the bearing in, and then this side does the pinion seal, and then also the transmission seal. So the rear main shaft goes in there and then pushes the seal in, and then that works on the pinion seals and that works on the cage bearings. So just going to be a cool little all-in-one tool for doing some of your maintenance when you're changing bearings and changing seals out.
What, since that's a prototype piece, when do you expect those to be on the shelf?
I would say probably 2 weeks.
Okay, cool. We've got a question already for Jeff. Kevin McFarland from up in Michigan says, "Hi Jeff, I have a 2017 XL. When using the left rear spring, should you be more concerned with the left rear ride height number or the preload of that spring at full droop?"
I think you need to be more concerned about the preload, because your ride height, I mean, depending on how soft he is, I mean, you could be a 50 or a 75 or a 80 or a 100 or 125-pound spring, and or let's just say you got 200 pounds of extended load, and each of those springs, they're all going to vary different, especially with the driver's weight in the car. Depending on how guys set the cars up with the driver's weight or without. I think the extended load is way more critical than the ride height with a softer left rear spring.
Yeah,
I agree, Chad.
I would agree. Yeah, I mean, you basically run at attitude. That extended number is pretty much what you're going off of anyway. So I would agree.
So any other suggestions on that topic while we're waiting for another question?
How soft are you on the really soft stuff, Jeff? The 50, 75, or you back up over 100?
I generally stay around the 100. I'm usually 100 or an 80-pound spring. You could probably about weld the 100-pound spring in my car. I mean, I just seems to be easier for me to tune around, and I think when you start getting that soft stuff in there, your load becomes really critical, and I think left side percentage, whether you're low or high, becomes really critical, and how you brake, into the corner and how you enter the corner with that softer stuff seems to be, I don't know if it's cut out for a lot of old school guys. I guess it's took me some adapting to learn how to drive it, and some of my braking techniques, a little bit different.
So how about explain that a little bit more in detail? What you mean, Jeff? How you change your driving style?
Well, let's just say you can definitely be way more aggressive with a softer left rear spring. If you're a guy that's you're going to back out and back your corner way up early in the night, you're in a lot of trouble. I mean, you have to really be aggressive with a softer left rear spring. From what little bit I've seen, it enables you to charge in the corner more, especially when you're out of the throttle. The softer left rear spring seems to keep the car a little snugger. Entry for me, and then how you pick the throttle up. If you're a lot of left rear load or not a lot of left rear load, the car's really sensitive, a lot more sensitive with the softer stuff than it is the stiffer stuff, say versa 175 or 200. I mean, I'm still trying to learn how to drive it, so.
But the complete package, there's a whole lot more to it than just that 100-pound spring.
I
You kind of have to have a whole complete package, like a softer right front, etc. Correct?
I I think the softer right front is definitely, a lot of guys are going that direction. I mean, I've been playing with it some. Uh, it's all about keeping the car in attitude at the end of the day. And I think the shock package is, as well as is definitely more critical with a softer left rear spring. Uh, it's on every corner. I mean, your left front shock is just as critical as your right front shock to me. And and the guy was asking earlier about the left rear load. Well, and he's got an XL car. Well, is he 18 and a half inches of chain? Is he 19 inches of chain? Is he 18 inches of chain? Is he zero index? Is he standard? I mean, there's so many variances and so many combinations, and each one of those requires, I mean, I don't call Chad enough, but I mean, he'll tell you, I call him sometimes just lost as a goose, and I'm just, man, I need some help. I don't really know what I need to do here, and he'll tell me something. Well, I think that's what I was thinking that, but you just need that assurance,
Sure.
and he deals with so many people, just like you deal with so many people, and that's one thing that's helped us here, Shaw Race Cars. I mean, they had a huge customer base, so I'm able to talk to people, the guys here at the shop, Wilkie and Kevin and Travis, both Travises. I mean, even our welder guys, Travis, John, Mitch. I mean, they can all talk to somebody. So we got a wealth of information, but you got Johnny here that's got a 14-inch lower arm, and then you got Steve that's got a 16-inch lower arm, and it's just all a different deal, and it really is. You got to put it all together, just like you
Correct.
said. It's not just, hey, I'm going to put this bar on, or I'm going to put this shock on, and I'm going to go out here and haul the mail. It don't quite work like that.
No, no, it's definitely a whole package. Um, Eric has a question. Our thoughts on needling tires, when to do it. Well, it's illegal in IMCA, but what's your knowledge background? I've not really messed with needling tires a whole lot. I know talking to the Hoosier guy, he said it's a waste of time. He said the tire's not like a piece of meat that you can tenderize. It's just, it's a way, he thinks it's a waste of time.
He kind of explained it like when you're pushing the needle in there, you're not actually penetrating it. You're just pushing the rubber away, and then when the needle goes away, it relaxes. So you're not getting far enough into the surface, I think is what he was talking about, right? You don't get deep enough in there to make a difference. So you're basically wasting your time and effort.
Yeah, you're not actually making a hole because the needle doesn't take rubber out. So yeah. So anyway, that's our opinion. Chad, what's the benefit of the bearing in the Weir's spring alignment cup on a slider?
So we're in the process of switching all of our spring cups to a 5-inch OD grab, and we've done the sliders, we've done the right rear coilover kits now, and that allows us to put that extra Torrington bearing in that cup. So like we were just talking about them really soft left rear springs. When you take a 16, 18, 20-inch spring and then you travel it down to whatever it is at ride height, 14 inches, and you take that spring and run it through that much travel, having that bearing on there, spring twist, that bearing helps with that spring stay in line when it's twisting and not bow. So it makes that spring happier through travel, and that actually will extend the life of it, not letting it bow out and get fatigued.
Keeps the spring more linear.
Linear, yeah.
Yep. What's the difference pinning the left rear floater to the cage versus running the floater with the bar on the chassis? In other words, locking up a brake floater. What's the advantage or disadvantage of doing either or?
Well, I feel that Jeff will be, I think if you run both ways, Jeff, you'll have some good insight on this. But when you go to the suspension cage, then you're connected right to the 4-link rods, but also you're tied through the coilover on the rear. So you have a leverage point that's farther back. So it's more effective than the brake floater arm, I would say, and gets it on the right front sooner and harder than the brake floater arm. Have you gone both ways there, Jeff? Or?
Yeah, I have forever. We ran those divorced. With the brake floater rod and then the birdcage rod, so they were separated. And then I don't know. Towards the end of last year, I decided, the clearances on some of the older cars that we had, it was really tight there. So we just decided to lock it up, and that's kind of the way I've been running it. And the only thing I can say about that is if you've got the brake floater rod separate, then you can cock the rod back like on the bird cage. You can lengthen it. Well, not on bird cage, but the brake cage. You can lengthen the rod and cock the cage back, or you can drop it up or down on the brake cage and make it more influential as to when you get on the brakes, you can pin it on the right front, or you can make it do different things where you can take angle out of it, and make it less influential when you're on the brakes. Whereas like when you're on the cage and you're in droop, I mean, you're basically 45, 48 degrees on the brake motor rod, and it is going to put it on the right front. And the more rear brake you run, the more it's going to try to put it on the right front when you get on the brakes. So, brake floater, I wish they would ban them. I know. I think it would help our sport.
Don't give anybody any ideas.
No, they're not going to, but it's, I don't know, it's definitely a tuning part of the car that I think a lot of guys use to really tune their race car with anymore, where I think we should be tuning in other areas, but you really can't because of the way what that does to the car when you apply the brake. Your right front load needs to be different, right front spring needs to be different, right front shock needs to be different, all because of that. And that's been my experience. Now I'm running locked up. It's all one deal. Whether I'm going to continue to do that or not, I'm really unsure right now. I'm really unsure right now. So
Now we had working with a rookie sport mod guy that moved up to a modified. Of course, sport mods you can't run a floater. He's had a little bit of a problem. If he's got to really get on the brakes real hard, it'll smash the frame in the ground.
Yeah.
I mean, it'll just dive the right front end. Well, with Boone Speedway last weekend, it was a little bit on the rougher side around the bottom. And so we actually took it off and mounted it to the axle, or bolted it right to the cage rather than separately with two different rods. His comment was it definitely helped the right front problem, but he said it didn't seem like it wanted to stay up on the bar quite as well as it did when he had the brake floater on it, was what he explained. It made the car more drivable on the brakes, but he felt that he lost a little bit with keeping the attitude in the car.
was this your customer?
Yeah.
You didn't sell him a shock?
You got to take things one step at a time, man. One step at a time. He's still a rookie. Okay, Sean's got a question. Can you run bearing under the rear spring on a Northern Sport mod? No. They would really frown on that.
Yeah, you can't even run a swivel cup on the back.
No, it has to be a welded solid cup on the bottom, and then of course the swivel can be on the top, but the bottom's got to be welded solid to the housing. Brent wants to know on a 2018 XL USRA B mod, entry's good, apex is good, slight push starting to come off. Can correct it with steering input, then loose off and down the straightaway. He has an 18-degree solid pull bar. I'm using the setup sheet that you sent from Shaw. have left rear at 22 degrees, right rear is at 5, left rear chain is at 5 inches. I like to not lift on entry.
Don't we all?
Yeah. I'd like them not to lift either. It's better for business. Recommendations on getting off traction, getting traction off. Did you understand all that, Jeff?
Yeah, it sounds like to me that he's great entry, but he is a little bit from the apex off. He might have a small shove through the apex, and then every now and then he's loose off from what little bit I'm gathering. Uh,
Yeah.
I'm always an entry center guy, so my entry's my biggest part that I get concerned with, and then I deal with center. Uh, on the B mod program, like I said, our B mod program seems to be pretty good. Uh, Between Wilkie and Kevin, I mean they've got a really good B mod program. I've just am getting familiar with it, I guess you would say. I've talked to Bob a few times about the B mods, just what little bit we've shot the bull. But in my opinion, their standard deal. I don't know if he's 550 right front or 500 right front, but he probably needs a 500 right front instead of a 550. And maybe a little bit more left lower angle, maybe a little bit more chain to help him steer around when he's on the throttle, to get through that center. And then the chain will give him some more bar angle for drive down straightaway. Uh, Other than that, I would say panhard bar or wheelbase or wedge. One of those little things on those cars, too much J bar angle will make them kind of shove, center, and then they shear off. Uh, USRA, he's probably got a J bar.
Yep.
Uh, the pinion height's really critical on that. I don't know that I'd be below the center of the pinion. He could be that. I mean, just a quarter inch there is huge. You agree? You guys
Oh,
agree?
by far. Yeah, by far. I mean that's one of those things that can make a daylight and dark deal on one of them cars if you've got it centered or one click above with the rear adjuster can make that car free ride up and just rotate a little bit better. And the wheelbase, I agree with you on that one. I think um, it sounds like the spring's keeping the left rear hooked up too much. If he softens it right front, it just might help that car rotate. The problem really sounds to me like it's in the middle of the corner because
Yeah.
if it's loose coming off, it's because he's tight in the middle. So you got to fix the tightness in the middle, and then, like you said, the exit will come. If you get the other two right, exit will come.
Yeah, middle of the corner for me. I mean, you guys just have to tell me. I mean, to me, J bar is critical for me in the middle of the corner. Doesn't seem to really affect my entry as much as it does a lot of other guys. I think a lot of that's how I drive. Uh, but the B mod world's kind of a different world, but it's still the same principle.
Now that section on how you drive, is that anything to do with how you got that nickname that they always use when they introduce you at the racetracks? Or how
For,
did you ever get that name anyway?
oh no, it's a long story.
Oh, okay. That's all right then. We'll just go with it.
We'll
Uh,
get that on the next episode.
okay, we'll get that on the next episode. No problem. Suggestion, Jeff, on a 2016 XL Northern Sport Mod. What's the suggested camber caster?
On a 16 XL.
Yep.
Camber caster left front. I'm gonna say three and a half camber left front, two and a half caster, and then on the right front, I think we're like 5 and 5, 5.5, 5.5, 5 and 5 on the right front. Generally run a little more caster in the sport mods than like we do the A mod stuff. Uh, we run a little more camber in the A mod stuff now on the left front. We've been putting a little more in there, but uh, that's general rule of thumb. I'd have to look at the setup sheet, but I think I'm
No, I mean,
closer.
that sounds pretty normal for a Chevelle stub car. I mean, that's about where we're at with our sport mods. That's pretty common. Um, Next question, Jason. Ashton said the exact same thing. We ran it on the cage. So he must be talking about the brake floater. Next one is right rear spring rate on top of housing needs to be softer side to say 150 to 175 or 225 to 250. Well, on the norm, with the springs on top of the housing, our cars tend to run a little bit stiffer right rear. With the Northern Sport Mod, seems like the cars just like that a little bit better. Gives you a little bit more side bite. Keep in mind they don't have quite the horsepower that the A mods have, so you kind of got to keep those cars a little bit more free so they rotate a little better. On a Northern Sport Mod, should be worried about the scale bite numbers or the ride heights. Seems like the car wants less bite, but I can't get the ride heights correct without adding more bite. Well, it's a situation on scaling the car. You got to kind of go when you're scaling that to be able to get the bite number and the ride height right. You've got to work with all four corners. So, what we usually talk about or recommend is working with the two fronts and the right rear. The left rear kind of usually ends up being whatever it is to get the car to have the bite in it. I'm not as concerned about the left rear ride height unless your spoiler is too high, and then that you just have to figure that out. But you can get that bite number and the ride heights to match. It can be a process. Does increasing the caster on the front right help a car turn better into the corner? What's your opinion, Jeff?
On the gas or off the gas?
Pick.
Well, when you're steering to the left, the more caster you have, the harder it's loading the right rear. So, in my opinion, to answer that correctly, I think it depends on how much caster gain the car has.
Yeah, correctly.
If you have a ton of caster gain, definitely more is not going to help you if you're trying to turn in.
What can happen when you get to running a lot of caster? You can get into that rock motion where the car's trying to the right front when your back steer is trying to lift, and then you get that lock up where the left rear is trying to lift the left rear and the right front's trying to lift the right front, and then all of a sudden it kind of affects the right rear, makes the car kind of inconsistent. So I'm not a real big fan of a lot of caster. Caster split can help the car turn better, but if you're going to do that, I would probably reduce the caster on the left front rather than increasing the caster on the right front. So if that's what Fred Ryland wants to tell you, hi, Jeff. Colton Stevens. Bob, do you have a preference in shock brands for a USRAB mod? Well, the way the shock companies are today, man, everybody builds good stuff. Our program here at BHE, we work with CSI, Bilstein, AFCO. We do a little bit of Penske stuff. My personal favorite, is something I really wouldn't want to say here publicly because I could shoot myself in the foot. All those shocks are really good. I mean, I would, of the three, the Bilstein, the AFCO, and the CSI, I think some of the improvements that Bilstein has made to their program in the last couple of years has definitely helped their deal. I think they're all very good. I wouldn't hesitate.
That was pretty politically correct. Bob Harris for Congress.
Yeah. Well,
he's
you got to
good.
talk
He's
a long
good.
time and not say nothing. You know how it is. Joe, back to that question. When you asked, is the question, Jeff, you asked if he's on the gas or off the gas. He says he's on the gas. So increasing the caster on the right front while the car is on the gas, will it help it turn better?
I would say yes. You think I'm screwed up?
No, I think increasing the caster split, in my
Yeah.
opinion, is probably.
Actually, I would say less left front. Like a lot of guys will go to 0 or 1 in the left front instead of running a couple degrees. It seems to help.
Yeah,
Uh,
my only fear when you start increasing the caster on that right front is that jacking effect that can happen. And then what happens is that jacking effect takes place in the middle of the corner. Well, the middle of the corner is where you have to be the fastest you can be, because that's where the race is going to be won. So, in my opinion, that's would.
and it depends also, I think, on if you're running a Pinto spindle, which is a 10.5 degree or whatever spindle versus the 7.5 degree or whatever 3-piece spindle and the scrub, all that comes into play there, and it seems like to me the 3-piece spindles are a little more forgiving as to if you miss your caster a degree or so, just because of that inclination.
Correct.
And that goes back to the jacking effect, just like what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing with the Pintos or the 2-piece spindle is you can actually run more caster, but it doesn't have the effect on it. When you've got that 10 degree, you start putting a lot of caster in that, and that really produces a jacking effect. It can really mess things up. Cody, we also have the Shaw style Weir's left rear birdcage. What are we gaining by being in the holes that are more in front of the rear end than the holes directly below the rear end? He's talking about the sport mod that has the bracket, the holes that are more probably 2 to 3 inches ahead of center.
The Shaw plate.
Yeah, so he's wanting to know what he's gaining by that.
So, I mean, the theory there is that you can move that bar forward in the car and higher in the car, and it gets the motion going faster on the left rear. So you don't have to run as much bar angle to get the car to get up at attitude and get it to roll steer as you would if you were under the center line of the axle. So, and then that allows you to have a little bit less drive angle, so you're not so pogo sticked when you get to that point, is I think the theory there. So, Jeff, you got anything to add on that?
I agree 100%.
Darren's got a question on a Northern Sport mod. Car not hiking much. Chain is not going to full extension, nor is the shock. Believe it may have something binding. Also, same car. What's a good trail or lead?
Man, he's got to have something bound up. What kind of, does he have an eliminator in the left rear, or is the springs on top, or?
Northern Sport mod, so they'd be on top.
Oh yeah.
Something's got to be bound up somewhere.
I would have to say that's the case. Something's possibly binding, because that car, if you've got angle in that lower trailing arm, that car should hike under the throttle. Some guys have more of a problem not keeping it up on the bar when it gets up there, and your shock builder can help you with that. There's other things we can do, learning to trail brake the car a little bit more. The other question was lead and trail. Well, it kind of depends on the car, and what we've found, it also depends on how the car is built. Like earlier, Jeff was talking about at the beginning when some of the new cars now are starting to build lead into the front end where the front stub is turned. That's what we did back in 1997, was turn the stub 3/4 of an inch. The problem with that is sometimes you do have to end up running a little bit more lead in that car than you would a squared up front stub. It's just Seems like those cars at times can keep the car turning too much up off the corner. So we found we've had to run a little bit more there. Um, Trail will tend to make a car tail out coming off the corner. It definitely makes you good going through, definitely makes it good in the middle. It's really good in the middle. You just have to be a little careful on how the car comes up off the corner. Uh, Jeff,
Darren might want to he might want to take that thing and put it on the ground and give it the squeak test. If it's
um,
not moving to extension, there's got to be a maintenance issue there. Push down on the car. If the car is real rigid, don't move, makes loud noises, something's wrong. Something needs to be addressed there.
yeah, I would agree. Sorry about the noise here. Put him in his kennel, would you please? He must have heard some spook outside here. He gets all excited. Um, Next question is Jeff, or Chad wants to know, Jeff, if you are going to run any USMTS shows this year.
Yeah, we're going to run a couple. Towards the end of the year there, we've got a couple places we're going to go. Gonna, forever I've always based everything on IMCA. Still going to race majority IMCA just because that's what, my main program is built around. But in the business sense, you have to be able to travel to run USRA, USMTS, UMP, with soda. I mean, just because we have to sell cars in each division. And so towards the end of the year here, like I said, we're working on some potential sponsors right now. And, my plan right now, and we're already in effect, is, have two IMCA cars and then have like a USRA UMP style car, and then run a few with soda shows too, because we do have a lot of customers up in that area, uh, and it's not something that I can just do or we can just do right now. It's going to take us a year to get to there, but we are going to do that. I think next year we may go to Florida and run a few races. We had actually planned on maybe doing it this year, but we didn't. We just really had to kind of watch what we were doing, But I mean, they kind of give me the green light now. Hey, go race. This is what we want you to do. We want you to help us develop these cars, and they're all for it. I mean, I could come in here tomorrow and say, hey, I'm going to Florida for a week. I'm going to go race. Oh, see ya. Uh, but I'll have to come back and get the company card. But I mean, that's the way that goes.
Yeah, funny how that works. Todd wants to know, how does left side weight affect the car, more versus less?
Uh, Off the gas, more is looser. Uh, and definitely more left side is definitely more traction off the corner. But if you do not drive straight and you got too much left side weight, you're going to be loose. I mean, you got to drive really straight. You got to be really smooth. Uh, I think, I mean, in the IMCA world, everybody's around a certain percent. Like with a driver 54, 54 and a half. But then, I see some of these bigger guys get in these cars. It's 250, 300 pounds, and good and well they can't get rid of the left side weight, and they are fast. I mean, forever. I mean, Jason Walla, he's a big guy. Probably 270 or even bigger, and I mean he was fast in the slick. And so it just, I think a lot of it's how you drive the car, how the car's set up. Naturally, if you've got a bigger driver versus a 130-pound driver, the car is going to have to be set up a little bit different.
Yeah, I've found in the past that a high left side weight car is the same. It's free getting in. If you can drive it in straight, it's a great drag race car because it'll come off the corner like Jack the Bear. It's a little more finicky. It takes a little more finesse getting the car into the corner. Jimmy wants to know, on a 3-link car, left rear spring in front, left rear shock behind, is there much to gain or lose with the shock height? On a 3-link car, no. I really don't think the shock height is going to have any effect on the car. The spring table is set with the springs. Um, so if the left front spring is in front, it must be on a slider or a coilover. That's something that will get into the spring table. As long as its mounting location is slightly above the right rear, I think it would be good. I wouldn't. That's where with the shock being separate, the shock's not going to have any effect on it, in my opinion. Carson has a question for Jeff. Would you rather run an open motor versus a crate motor in IMCA modifieds?
Oh, me. Well, I mean, I fought it as long as I could, but I mean, I love the open motor stuff just because you have to have quite a bit of throttle control. The crate motor seems like it's kind of took some of that out, but I mean, at the end of the day, your good racers mainly are still the ones that's probably going to be at the front. When the big pay's in hand. I mean, I love the open motor stuff, just like every racer out there did, but it's just too hard to keep up now, and that's that. And the problem is it's addictive. Let's just say, I mean, we had those crate killers and this and that, and you could go out and you'd just be so close, and you could maybe win one or run second and come from 10th, but at the end of the day, you're winning 1 out of 15 races versus 5 out of 15. And no matter how good you think you are, I mean, when I say your average Joe guy starts coming in there and beating you, you better be going that direction because it's done surpassed where you're at. That's kind of the way I look at it. I just in the slick, with the weight of the motor and how they've got the torque curve and stuff, it's going to be really hard for somebody to outrun a crate in a good car, good decent driver. I think it's damn near impossible anymore. I mean, if Ricky Thornton can't do it, it ain't gonna happen. I mean, let's just face
it. We had an open motor at Boone the other night.
Oh, here we go. Did he win?
He won. However, the crate car was faster that was behind him.
Yeah, well, okay. Like I said, there's a lot of talent in that seat. So,
when you look at the actual times, the laps that they ran, yeah, the car running second had faster and better laps. The car looked a little smoother, but like you say, talent's hard to pass up on that deal.
Yeah, I mean, he just races so much, and then it's where you're at. Like if Boone, if there's ever a place that an open motor could get it done, that's one of them. There's some places in California that, if I went, yeah, and I hadn't seen the race, but I mean, and not taking nothing away from Ricky, but I mean, there had to be some bite in the track. Now, if he beat him with an open motor and the slick, I hats off to him. Like I said, he's probably the best in the sport right now. But
there was grip around about him.
Yeah, he's patient, smart. He's not going to get off the bottom. He knows what he's got. Like I said, he's a lot smarter racer than people really know, I think. So he'll play dumb, but he's really not that dumb.
Darren's got a question. Bird cage is level at pinion angle. I'm not completely sure that's a fairly open question because if you're talking about the two-link bracket,
he explains it later.
Oh,
okay. Go down a couple. It's a sport mod, 7 degrees, yes. So on the two-link cages, we set all the cages level with the pinion angle in it, right, Bob? Is that what you do?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're at 7 degrees, and that's exactly what we do. We put the pinion at 7 degrees, and then the the two-link brackets are level. What's a good starting point for bar angle on a 4-bar IMCA car?
Chad, you got the vast majority. Tell me so I know where to put mine this week.
I just get my information from Bob. Bob,
Uh, well,
there's stuff all over the board. I mean,
Yeah,
there's-
I mean,
everybody
it goes
runs
back
a
to
lot of different things. You know, as a rule of thumb, on that right side, 18 degrees is a pretty common starting spot. The lower bar, you know, you're going to want to be maybe 2 degrees uphill. Left rear, you know, the lower bar is going to probably be in the 7 degree number. The left upper bar actually is all going to depend on how much hike is in it. You're going to want to run that thing so that when it's up against the chain, that you're about 45 degrees, because when you figure it on racing mode, it's probably going to be in the 48 degrees. You get much over the 48 degrees, and if you don't have the zero indexing plates, you're flirting with a little bit of danger there of something over centering itself, which could cause a big problem. So that's kind of general recommendations. Brian's got a question. Pull bar point to the right front. Location of the pull bar.
I think it needs to be centered over the drive shaft. I mean, I've been right, left, backwards, forward. I mean, you know, I've been every way you can be, and you know, I see a lot of guys in the USMTS type stuff have the pull bar to the right. I think the spoiler and stuff kind of plays into effect, but I haven't seen a lot of guys in the IMCA world with the pull bar to the right have success. That's just me. Maybe I hadn't looked under enough people's cars, but generally we're center, 1 inch left or 1 inch right. You know, I know the Rage cars, some of their stuff's way to the left. I don't think right. I just, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so.
Yeah, if it's pointed at the right front tire on decel, it's going to drive that right front into the racetrack, right?
Well, and the thing is, like as an example, if you run it straight with the drive shaft, and then you put the car in motion so that it's at running ride height, the car is actually going to be, the drive shaft's going to actually be slightly pointed to the right front. So if you're already pointed to the right front, it's going to go further to the right front, because the mounting point on the chassis, when the car is all rocked up and the left rear is all hiked up, is going to move to the right. So that being said,
Yep.
I agree with Jeff. We run our stuff square. I mean, it's straight with the car. I've played with a lot of times having it actually point towards the left front so that when it's all through its motion, that it's dead center in the car. I can't say there's a big gain or whatever, but in theory, you would think that would be okay. So I don't, you know, it's just what I have found. Ride height or hiked up. And Brian was at your school, Jeff, in January. So his pull bar pointing to the right front, ride height or hiked up. Well, like we just said, ride height is center. I wouldn't point it to the right front.
I agree.
Next question. What's your opinion about Panhard bar length? I prefer a minimum length fast acting bar, but what would be the benefit of a long tube way out of the right side, a long tube way out of the right side tube?
I'm not, you're saying like Chad has.
Let me read this one more time.
I think he's talking about moving it out on the rear end side, right, Chad?
I think so. I don't know if it's a sport mod or an A mod though, but either way, the farther you move that point to the right, you're going to stick the right rear harder and make the car freer. Correct?
Yeah. Well, what it's going to actually do is going to make it tighter in corner entry, but it's going to make it much easier to snap loose. So the guy that tells you that my car's snappy loose off the corner, I'll guarantee you he's just too tight. And what happens when you get that bar to the point where it's closer to one tire or the other, now we're not using both tires for side back. We're just using one. Well, you've got 8 inches versus 16 inches it's going to be a situation where we need to. I believe it's better off if it would be center.
Yeah, so he just said it's a Northern Sport mod on the right side axle tube. So
Yeah. So in my opinion, I would run it as close to the center of the pinion as I could, and I'd run it outside the frame rail on the left side. Okay, next question. Should Northern Sport Mod bird? Yeah, we already did that one.
level.
Randy wants to know how much pull bar should a UMP modified pull bar have under acceleration, and how many pounds of pressure at a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 1 inch of travel and full travel.
So a UMP car takes a little bit more travel just because they have a stickier tire and big time horsepower. So most of the UMP guys are probably 1 3/4 to 2.5, depending on their program. You know, I don't have the graph numbers in front of me, but at that 2.5 number is where you're going to get to that 2,000, roughly the weight of the car. So you stop to travel the pull bars. So UMP is where I have my least amount of experience, but mainly a spring bar in UMP just because of the sticky tire and the mega horsepower. It tends to beat the biscuits up too much. You won't get any longevity out of them. So that's kind of what the UMP guys shoot for there.
Brent wants to tell you, Jeff, that it would be really cool if you could come up to the Wissota country and run some races.
Yeah, we're planning on it. That's you know, I got several buddies up in that area, so it's just going to be towards the end of the year before we do that.
Up here in the Northwoods.
Yeah, if I can get, you know, my sponsor up there to keep me up to date on these new products that's coming out that I don't know anything about, then we'll be all right.
Don't feel like the Lone Ranger on that.
I was just wondering if
you got to call 3 times a day to be able to stay in that loop here. They're doing so much research and development so fast that it just.
I was just hoping when he said that he already had us one in the mail. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it's in the mill.
It's in the mill. It's on the horseback these days. The U.S. mail is pretty slow. It's broke.
Yeah, for sure.
Rob wants to know, what are your thoughts on a left rear shock being mounted directly above the housing? Have you played with that at all?
Yeah, I tried that one night at Minot, North Dakota. And for some unknown reason, and Chad probably remembers this, I had the left rear shock on top, and then I said, well, I'm going to try a clamp bracket behind, and whatever I had, I didn't have it clearance right. Do you remember that night? I'm telling you.
I do remember that.
I broke the pull bar, my left rear shock, my left rear eliminator. Anyway, so I never tried it again because whatever I had, I didn't have everything clear, so we just put it on in a hurry, which was stupid. And I tore up more shit than you could ever imagine. I told Jazz, I don't even know how I can get all this fixed, but we got it fixed. Ended up running second or third, and I think Hunter won. I can't remember, but
Bob, you can
mess with that much.
You can probably talk a little bit, but taking the shock off and putting it on the axle tube takes the cage out of the rotation. So you would build the shock a little bit different when you go up on top than you would when it's on the cage, just because you don't have the jacking force of the suspension cage on there. So it's more.
Yeah, very correct. When you put the shock on top of the housing, it does just like if you put the spring on top of the housing. It just holds the car up. It's going to control the motion up or down. However, it's not going to have any influence when you're on the throttle or off the throttle. So with the shock being in front, and why a lot of times we run the shock in front of the housing, like on a normal modified, is the fact it's more about helping to keep the car up on the bar with the shock and spring together rather than running it separately. But I've seen different people do it. It's illegal in IMCA. I don't see a lot of people doing it, so I kind of come to the conclusion that there's not a big benefit. We played with that it was probably 3 years ago down in Vegas. And that wasn't the place at the time to really be testing it, so we never really tested it much after that. Travis wants to know, when you're using the load stick, Chad always talks about static ride height numbers and your down numbers. How do you know how far the right front travels so that you know how far to pull it down?
Well, one of my tricks that I like to do if I go to the racetrack, I don't know what you do, Taylor, but when I was a crew chief, I painted the shock shaft just with a Sharpie or a paint marker. You get more accurate data just because if you put your bump rubber up on the shock or whatever and you spike a hole or something, you're going to get inaccurate data there. You can look at the dust mark too, but painting that shock shaft with a Sharpie, and then you would come in, move the suspension to that mark, get a center to center distance, and that'll tell you where you're running. I don't know what you do, Taylor, when you go to racetracks, if you're hitting the cross member or hitting the lower control arm all the time, or how do you go about it on a race night?
I learned the magic marker trick from you, because I was saying, man, I'm getting 4 inches on the right front. And Chad's like, there ain't no way. I said, I'm telling you, I am. Well, so actually, we were at a really slick place in Ardmore, Oklahoma. Awesome little track. And for some unknown reason, uh, I turned around in the pits and went back to the trailer, and I just zeroed my right front shock and went back to the trailer, and I had 4 inches of travel. And I was like, shit, I hadn't even hit the racetrack yet, So I called Chad. He's like, man, you got to mark that thing with a magic marker. And was the same thing on the right rear. I thought I was getting way more than what I was actually getting. So learned a lot there.
Eric wants to know, is there a sweet spot for mounting the left rear chain with reference to the distance to the rear end differential, running a 9-inch forward? Well, the left rear chain, I would highly recommend it almost as far inboard as you probably could put it, up against the center section. It's not up against the center section, but where the tube's welded to the center section, because then what you do is you can limit your travel, but you don't have the leverage of trying to snap the tire loose if you get in a rough situation, or if the car rolls a different way. When you're clear out by the hub almost, it's just too severe of a movement. We're getting close to 8 o'clock here, so I'm going to take just a few more questions. Mark wants to know, when setting the pinion angle, do you add pinion angle and angle of the drive shaft? Say 4 degrees pinion angle plus 3 degrees of the drive shaft is a total of 7 degrees, or are you just 7 degrees at the pinion? We're talking about 7 degrees at the pinion.
Correct.
Because not knowing how high your motor is would have an effect on what you want. So anyway, next question: why does my ride height drop 1.5 inches on the left rear every time I run it? I'm running a 125-pound spring. Well, I'd be taking the spring out and measuring the height of the spring and checking the spring, because if it's dropping, I would have to say there's a spring issue there.
Yeah, it's losing free height or something.
Free height. Yeah.
It's got to be losing free height.
That happens sometimes.
Yeah. Well, when you get to run, especially if this is a Northern Sport mod, when that thing twists, people don't think that you get a lot of pinion movement on one of those cars because they got a solid upper bar. But with the steer that we're putting in these cars, and the difference in angle of the left rear trailing arm and the right rear trailing arm, that old spring is winding itself up and back and forth. It's amazing how much they go through. So that's why a lot of times I'll tell our guys with the sport mod stuff that new springs fairly often is not such a bad idea, especially for when you figure the cost versus a tire. When you're running that light a spring on a Northern Sport mod, I think you're running into an issue there. Any suggestions on a lift arm in a mod versus a pull bar? Have you run lift arms before, Jeff?
Yeah, I have. It's been a while. It's been a while. But it
Uh,
just depends on what division he's running. I mean, IMCA, you can't run one.
right.
USRA, a lot of those guys have torque arms, and that's another deal. It's a total different way of tuning the car. The torque arm's probably a little easier to get in the corner and the slick. Uh, as far as braking and the way the thing works and activates, may not have quite as much instant traction, uh, but it's probably a little easier to drive if the car is balanced right. Uh, but I mean, I still see a lot of guys in that division with the pull bar, hauling the mail too. So
With a car toting the left front, no matter what you do, what should I be looking for? Left front 1 inch off the ground, no matter what, with a 1 inch from the ride height on the left front, 17 3/4 left rear drop with a 175-pound load at drop. If you're toting the left front, my opinion, you either have too much J-bar in it, the rear end's too far to the left, or you've got something too soft on the right rear. What's
Top rod's too flat, too much left bottom rod. You go back to that whole package thing. There's a lot of variables there that could be the reason why you're picking the left front up, but I would go down the list of them 4 or 5 things right there, and it'll probably sit back down.
yeah, another thing too, he said 1 inch from ride height on the left front. I mean, guys are all over the board there. Chad will tell you some of them is tied down at ride height. I think most guys are a little more than that. I want to say 1.5 inches, 2 inches. But I mean, too short a right rear chain. If you're too short on the right rear, the car can't come up. So, it's, I mean, we learned that years ago up in Minot, Bob, that was when they first come out. You remember we were there and I come in and I said, man, the car's fast. But he said, well, hell, your right rear's off the ground. Do you remember when we were doing that? He said, just take that thing off. And we ended up winning the race. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it was tied down enough to the point where the right rear had come up off the ground coming off the corner, and I'm like, I don't
he's
think
like, Jesus, son, man, can you not feel that?
what
I said,
the
I
hell
don't
are
know.
you doing? Yeah, I remember asking that question. You mean to tell me you can't feel that? Charlie's got a question. Wants to know, Jeff, if you prefer the AFCO clip versus the Southwest Speed clip,
The cars we're building now.
or an OEM.
Oh, I'd choose the OEM over any of them. You just can't find them anymore, But the AFCO clip is definitely the strongest of all of them, and probably by far the nicest quality. They're a little bit more money, but we do all of them here. If a guy wants a Southwest Speed, we don't have any issue with it. We do a lot of business with Kratzberg and them guys down there. It really just kind of depends what a guy wants, but uh, the cars that I've been building now have the AFCO clip. We do a lot of business with AFCO too, so they're definitely the strongest. I think there's a little bit of weight difference in them. I think that the OEM clip's probably the lightest of the three.
Yeah.
So there's something to that old metal versus the stuff we're dealing with nowadays. Uh, there's a lot. It seems like there's quite a bit of work in the Southwest Speed versus the AFCO. But I think they're all three good. But if I had my choice, it'd be a stock clip.
Travis has a follow-up on the load skip question. What's the difference between, say, 1,100 pounds at your down number versus 1,400 pounds? What does more load on the down number actually do to the car?
Chad or me?
Whichever one of you wants to attack it.
You can
Go
start.
ahead.
I'll finish. No, you start. You're the one that invented it.
Yeah. Well, it's no different than spring rate. So what does spring rate do? Makes the car turn in and gives the traction off, right?
Mhm.
So more load is going to make the car turn in and give you traction off the corner, I would say.
I think there's a fine line there of having too much load, uh, but it seems like the more load you put, the freer in it is, the tighter off it is. Uh, that's general rule of thumb for us. I think everybody all over the board, uh, right front travel. And it's just like Chad says, Chad's the one helped come up with the deal, but nobody wants to give him any numbers. I've always been pretty honest with Chad just because, I need his help. So, if I got to give up a little bit to gain, then, we're back to, hoping I have a better car or I've got more talent. So, I think all over general rule of thumb, it depends on what spring you got as to how much load you're going to have versus, you got a 400 right front spring versus a 500-pound right front spring. Then, are we shooting for the same number at 3 or 4 inches? They're definitely going to be different at ride height. So, I don't know that there's a magic answer to that question. I think it depends, whatever David Strimley runs or GRT runs versus what we run. Each style of car is balanced different. So therefore, I may need 1,500 pounds of load in 3 inches. This guy may need 1,800, and this guy may need 1,300. Depends on front row centers, motor location,
Shock mount location.
Yeah, jack mount. I mean, it's a huge deal there. Uh, Goes back to Chad's built too many different damn bird cages. We got too many configurations.
Just trying to win races, bud.
Man, I tell you. Well, we're up against the 8 o'clock. I want to thank you, Jeff. And of course, next week we've got David Stremming from Lethal Chassis. Don't forget about the Harris Clash, August 4th. And once again, Jeff, thanks for coming on here. It's been a lot of fun, and always enjoy visiting with you. And it definitely was a good time.
Yeah, I had a good time. I appreciate everybody that tuned in, and maybe we can do it again sometime. It's always a pleasure talking to you. I mean, I still talk to you some, so we have a great relationship, and that's it's great to know that. So.
Well, a lot of people sometimes ask me about who my favorite driver is, and I said it all depends on how much fun I want to have. If I want to have a driver that can win races and have a lot of fun doing it, it'd have to be Jeff Taylor.
So that goes back to the animal.
Yeah, I think
that'll explain it.
So anyway, all right, guys, thank you very much.
Thank you.